Hello and welcome to the Aspiring Women Mastermind Masterclass series. Today we are super pumped to be talking with my friend and the VA Empress, that's your new name, Anna Lee, who has created, we're friends through a mastermind called GoBundance. She created a course as a super busy mom who is investing in real estate with a W-2, and she just made a move across like the world. So homegirl gets stuff done, I'm here to tell you. So Anna is going to walk us through a couple of key things to know when it comes to hiring a virtual assistant. So with that, Anna, I'm going to throw to you.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you so much. Yeah, you nailed it right. I mean, the whole kind of notion why I even created this is just the whole topic of being super busy. You know, a lot of us, I'm sure, in the same boat. So I personally, as you mentioned, just moved across the world. My assignment ended in Switzerland. So 2 months ago, we moved back with our family here. We live not far from Philadelphia area. And it's myself, my husband, we have 3 little boys, 12, and 8. So very active family, soccer practices, just to name a few. On top of that, my husband and I invest in real estate. I'm running a wholesaling business in real estate. And I'm working W-2. So this kind of course came out of necessity and basically from my experience of just having to hire a virtual assistant. And in the end of the day, some people were just kind of asking me, Anna, can you please help me out? Like, how did you do that? What did you do? So I created a course basically just to say, listen, I cannot repeat myself like 100th time. So that's why I created the course. And so far, a lot of people have been really grateful for having done that, because I basically outlined everything that you may need to hire. But I'd like to kick in and kind of start with like, what is it? Why do you need it? And kind of go through step by step. So Mandy, I'm gonna share my screen. Let's
give it a try.
Move it in the presentation mode here. So let me see if you can see it.
I can see.
Okay, perfect, great. So let's start with what is a virtual assistant. I had somebody actually ask me, is that a robot? Like they do something online, you probably go, bot or something. And the answer is no. I mean, it's just a human being, the professional that you hire to just help you with, alleviate you from doing like unnecessary tasks or repetitive tasks and helping you sort of concentrate and help you, make more money or spend more time with your family, right? So definitely wanted to kind of like throw it out there as a beginning. What are the tasks that you can outsource to a virtual assistant? I'm not going to read all of these that I kind of mentioned here, but depending on the structure of your business, and some of you may be in the business, others may have a W-2 job, but think about anything and everything that you do right now that you are not an expert in, or you're just tired of doing that, or it takes a lot of time, right? So I've listed a couple of, ideas out here within marketing. I myself definitely outsource the SEO and Google ads. At some point I thought, I'm just going to learn it. I'm going to, learn how to code and, build a website and do all that. And that was very silly of me. Like, why would I spend my time? I'm already stretched so thin. Like, why would I do that? And I'm so happy when I hired the person. I can tell you within a certain amount of time, I started ranking #1 within my very high competitive market for wholesaling in Philadelphia. So I would never done it myself, or I would have been procrastinating or not doing the high quality of work that my virtual assistant do. Personally, I have a cold caller and texter, so that helps me a lot in my business. But think about in your businesses, maybe you have an admin task, right? Like very basic emailing, scheduling, answering calls, meeting minutes, invoices, billing. So think of all these tasks that can definitely be outsourced. From the online perspective, if you run a very active online presence, think about somebody creating a content for you, right? Blogs, YouTube videos, forums. I mean, Mandy, you specifically run a massive Facebook group, right? So having an admin that just kind of helps you out, navigating and moderating some comments. E-commerce for sure, like with a lot of the drop shipping tasks, the person doesn't have to be here, right? So any virtual assistant from any country of the world, as long as they're trained well, they can kind of walk the same steps that you do. A lot of us are in real estate in my group, like where Mandy and I are. We have agents, we have wholesalers, we have investors, but specifically within real estate, if you're an agent, you can have help managing listings, any type of acquisitions or dispositions type of roles within the real estate. Sourcing new clients, right? You can definitely outsource all that. And just the random stuff, right? Bookkeeping. If you are in the very basic level of your business, you're not advanced yet where you're ready to hire bookkeeping firm, you're doing everything yourself in Excel, well, think about outsourcing even that type of work. But it could be as high as kind of like if you're a growing firm, you can bring in a human resource, right? So I've helped recently somebody who is growing really rapidly, and they got to the point where now they have to use some regulations and have a presence of human resources because their company grown from 3 employees to 30, and they need to sort of manage that. Even the interviewing process, if you're growing so fast, you can definitely have a virtual assistant just kind of like be that front end human resource for you to like vet out all of the future candidate. And from the personal perspective, I don't know how many times I actually had to rely on my virtual assistant to book a birthday party, Christmas, like that's a big one. I love all my family and friends, but buying the presents is just not me. I mean, I would just spend hours and hours just researching stuff on Amazon, whatever it is. And instead, I just talked to my VA and I said, listen, I have a list of X. I just gave her a list and I said, kids in the family typically like gift cards to gaming stuff or whatever it is. And then adults, like that. And my grandma likes this. So she just went out and like gave me a proposal of what she can buy. And I'll be like, yeah, that sounds good. So all I had to do is just approve it. Hours of work for me. And she was like really done like within a couple of days. So so I would encourage you not to only think about your business task, but think about your personal life task and what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Is it like doctor's appointments? For me, it means that I have to book for 5 of us, right? Myself, my husband, and 3 boys. And I have to be always kind of like reminded, oh, I have to book this appointment or that. So think about outsourcing like anything in your life, not just the business tasks. So what are the top 10 reasons to hire a virtual assistant? Definitely if you want to drive your business growth, right? As I mentioned, I realized that I needed to have an online presence, right? So the SEO is one of my marketing channels. And again, I cannot be stretched so thin to basically, cover that base as well. So that's definitely number 1 reason. On the contrary, it also helps you strengthen your weak area, right? As I dabbled into the SEO, had I not hired that person, I would have known right away, like, this is my weak spot. Like, I know nothing about that. Why don't I just hire somebody? So I can just give you one example. Even though I hired my VA to work on SEO, I was still giving him an examples of what I think is needed for my website. And there's a difference between I need to have more leads through my website for this market. There's one thing, but I was telling him what to do. I was just like, hey, probably it's better to like advertise within my like smaller population towns, only because the quality of leads are coming better from that. And I'm nearby Philadelphia, and he would always tell me, Anna, but you have to be ranking number 1 within Philadelphia area, because that's where the population is. And then you can sort of like grow in surrounding areas. It took me 4 months to realize that I'm so stupid, like I shouldn't have done it. And then I spoke with so many people that confirmed that. And I had to apologize to him and say, I'm sorry, you were right all along. And he kind of like followed along. He like gently gave me all those tips and like you should do that. But you know, if you're the one asking for this, okay, I'll do that. So I feel like once you hire a VA, there's also a process of letting go, right? If you trust them enough that you think that there's like professionals of what they do that like 100%, right? So don't kind of like repeat my mistake. And of course, you have an access to the best talent, right? I can tell you from my experience, I primarily hire from Philippines, and a lot of them have either college, like bachelor degree, some of them even have master's degree. Others would go for and have actually dual education, you know, maybe it's in psychology and business, right? So you have a really, really amazing talent out there. They're definitely reducing your workload and stress. Definitely for me, I can experience that this, you know, the second I outsourced it, there was just no like nagging feeling. Oh my gosh, I'm always catching up to things to do, right? And definitely they free up time for strategic thinking, because part of growing is you have to have that free time to think like, what's my next move, right? So that's definitely important. If you are stuck and you feel like you're not growing anymore, if you're like in this maturity stage where you feel like, is that it? Like, have I like hit the ceiling? Think about like, what can you outsource so that you can move in that notion of like, think through the next steps. And on like kind of like maintenance of your business aspect, there definitely can improve your customer service support, your online presence. You can show that your business is available 24/7. On my website, on my Google My Business page, I don't even have from 8 to 10. I just say 24 hours, right? They can call, they can email anytime they want, because I have a coverage 24/7, right? So for a fraction of the cost, you can have that possible for your business. And of course, it kind of talks about the flexible hours. For example, Philippines and us were on a, depending on the time of the year, between 9 and 10 hour difference, but they're used to work so-called it's like a night shift, and they call it graveyard shift. Not everyone, you know, necessarily prefers to work this way, but they're used to working this way only because they understand that if they get a job from America, that's definitely going to be a higher pay for them that what they're getting on an average basis in their country. So when to hire a virtual assistant? Again, when your business requires growth and you are stretched too thin, you have a ton of repetitive tasks. They're non-core. Nothing involves of your kind of like brain power, any kind of strategic thinking. And you just don't even realize that you do it on a daily basis, right? Or monthly basis, however often you do it. I used to pull statements every single month, right? It's just kind of things that needs to be done. Every month I'll pull the statements, I'll make sure that I have receipts for everything. I'll go over and research if I don't have something. So think of what is in your business is very repetitive. Like I would start outsourcing that right away. If you thought before that you're not financially ready to hire a full-time employee, especially if you thought about, I need to hire help, but in America, I cannot afford it, right? Is it because I have to hire a full-time person, definitely higher pay? Right now, I can definitely tell you in a low scale pay, it's a hard time. And I'm sure that in every state, you can see that. I see it in my state, everyone is hiring, and nobody wants to get a job, right? Everyone is posting like $15 an hour, come work in Target, Wawa. I mean, we have multiple stores around the area and nobody wants to work. I don't know what's happening. It's either, you know, the dynamic of what happened with COVID, whatever it is, but it's a huge shortage right now. So if you think that you have to pay your employee more than $15 an hour because they're American, like I encourage you to kind of like change your perspective and like, virtual assistants are not going to be American based. So you can definitely afford what you thought before, maybe I cannot afford, you can definitely afford to hire an employee. It doesn't have to be full-time. Some of the work is project-based. So I have a virtual assistant that does cold calling for me. I pay them per hour. They work certain schedule. But I also have a project-based virtual assistants for my SEO, for my Google Ads campaign, and I have to pay them by project, right? So it's maybe more like a monthly fee, and they just deliver on tasks. And the last part, you're procrastinating, doing boring tasks, right? Like it doesn't fulfill you. So in my personal business, it's a follow-up on those leads. Like I need to always follow up on those calls. And I can tell you, I've found, oh my gosh, but I need to do this. I need to do that, right? So like I'm always bounced around for other more important things that don't drive sales for me. And I know that I have to do it, but I don't do it, right? I keep procrastinating and I'm thinking that it's boring and I want to do that. So that's definitely a time to hire a virtual assistant. I actually give you one example. I have a cold caller. I had two cold callers, and one of them is doing like a really great job. So at some point I was like, maybe one of my cold callers would just be full-time cold caller. The other one can do a follow-up, right? So it's more like a lead manager. And I offered that up to him and I said, listen, let me train you in what I do. Don't be afraid. Like, this is how we're going to do it. We'll test it out. He's doing amazing. He's doing it sometimes even better than I am because I'm procrastinating. I don't want to do it. And for him, like there is an incentive. If he's going to get me like a solid lead, then I can incentivize him with commission. So again, think about all these tasks that definitely are nagging you. Definitely time to hire a virtual assistant. So what are the options of hiring virtual assistant? And I want to kind of highlight both ways because I've done both. And my primary course is about hiring yourself. And I kind of would lead you to that and tell you why. So I've hired with an agency before. And my experience between hiring with an agency and doing it yourself is definitely agency is more expensive. You can see the math in the bottom of this slide. At a minimum, you're going to be saving $10,000 a year on a full-time employee. And I'm kind of being very conservative here. Agents, when you hire a virtual assistant through the agency, $10 is very kind of small rate. It's a very low rate. I've seen agencies that would offer you a virtual assistant like $13 an hour, $15 an hour. So I'm using the 10 to 5 sort of comparison to get down to that $10,000 saving. Also through the agency, you're going to have less control. So it's kind of very interesting aspect. The selling part from the agency, they tell you, I have a manager who's going to be managing your virtual assistant. And you're like, great, I don't have to do that. Well, maybe I don't like to manage people, or maybe I just don't want to spend time. And like, that's kind of more time that I have to spend. Well, I found it as a selling factor first until I actually started working with my virtual assistant. And then I realized I always have to triangulate. I have to teach the manager, for the manager to teach the virtual assistant. And they have some sort of like, if you're in a very general kind of industry terms, they will train them for you, but they can never train them based on what you need for your specific business, right? So if you have some specific systems that you're using or specific like requirements for your business, they can never do that. So you have to still do it, but you're now triangulating through a manager. So my first VA that I had, I never even got her direct contact. I always had to reach out to manager, and the manager will give her the perspective. So if I had some comments, please, like next time you speak with a seller, ask them if they have any other properties for sale. Well, I had to send it to my manager, and the manager will go send it to her. So always disconnect, not an instant communication. So I didn't really like that. That virtual assistant, funny joke there. I was listening through some calls that she was doing, and she called one of my sellers dumbass. And I was like, well, she's out the door. Thank God for this kind of quality control things that I kind of instill in my process, that I can re-listen to the calls that they do. It's just bad apple, nothing against the agency. You can have that happening to you even if you hire. So once I let her go, I hired another one through the agency again, kind of giving them another chance. And that person was amazing. Like I had the momentum going. I had so many leads. Everything was great. 4 weeks later, that person disappeared. I was calling the managers. I actually asked them before, can I have that person's direct phone number? And they finally agreed to that. So I was calling him myself. The agency called him, no answers, just disappeared from the planet Earth. I mean, I was always like, I was already like thinking like bad things. I'm like, God, maybe something happened to this person. Like, how can you just disappear? Just having such an amazing track record for 4 weeks and just disappear. And 5 days later, the agency kind of called me and they said, you know what, at this point, we would probably suggest for you to hire somebody new. So we'll train them and bring them on board. And at that point, I just gave up. I just said, I'm paying a higher level premium for the agency to be there as a, remediation. But I just lost somebody. I have to now I have to train another person. So I lost all of that momentum. And that's when I started looking for other options. And that's when I sort of hired myself, and kind of through trial and error, I figure out the process. So definitely you can hire for half the price when you do it yourself, not through the agency, because again, nobody has to have that margin. Nothing against the agencies. They're there for a reason. If you need something like fast or whatever, they're there, that's an option for you to use. But I didn't find as much of a benefit hiring myself than I found, hiring through the agency as I did myself. So definitely had more control right away. I've established the relationship, all the kind of like levels of trust were established right away. And I've onboarded my VAs always with a 2-week trial. Let's see how it works. You test me, I test you, right? So it kind of goes both ways. And definitely, I cannot tell you more like one of my VAs, I've been with him since October of last year. So it's coming up to about a year. Amazing person, right? It's just like rock solid. And I hired him for $4.50, and maybe 6 months later, I raised his salary to $5 an hour. And he has not been asking me for any more raise. And I felt like he deserved that, right? Because I've been hiring more virtual assistant, and he's definitely been my number one person out there. So, and of course, when you pay them $5 an hour, there's going to be less turnover. Actually, coming back to the story with that person, the person that disappeared, followed up with me 2 weeks later, sent me a direct message and said, Anna, I'm sorry, I had to leave that company because they were not paying me enough. I'll do everything and anything for you for $4 an hour. So I had to ask myself a question: how much did they pay them if he would be happy to work for me directly for $4 an hour, right? So that's why through the agency, you'll have a higher turnover because they pay them between $2 to $3. I later on started asking, how much do you get paid through the agencies? And I found out it's $2 to $3 an hour. At that point, people realized that with their experience, they can find somebody else. And that's why with agencies, they'll get there just to have a coverage of maybe like a month or so until they find a new job. But if you start them at $4 or $5 an hour, that's already a higher end for them. So there's no need for them to kind of move from one person to another. So where to find a virtual assistant? The first two, this is where I first dabble into and started myself, Upwork and Fiverr. They're sort of free, but think about that the fee of Upwork and Fiverr is included into how virtual assistants advertise their services. I'll give you an example. I recently hired an illustrator. My son wrote a book, so I needed to find an illustrator for the book, and I hired somebody from Upwork. And it's not surprised that sometimes people would say, hey, if you pay me directly, it should be like X. If it goes through Upwork, it should be that, right? So I just want to to put it out there. You just slightly overpaying for the fee of Upwork and Fiverr. There's nothing wrong. It's a facilitation. They give you security. I actually still went ahead with Upwork and pay them through Upwork, even if it's a little bit more, only because that gives me and that other person the security of quality work in the payment. And onlinejobs.ph, it's another way of hiring folks, specifically in Philippines. You do have to pay monthly fee to find a candidate. So let's say you sign up for this website, you advertise your job, and then whatever the output you get, you just have to pay monthly fee for that. And Facebook is my personal favorite. That's where I find all of my virtual assistants, and it's free, right? Like I just have a list of Facebook groups that I've already vetted, and I advertise there. No need to pay. So getting now to my course, what's in the course, and basically what tools and materials you need to hire your virtual assistant. It's not a rocket science, I promise. My course is probably between 45 minutes to an hour long, right? It's just split into like different sections. but it's definitely not as hard as you can think about this. So from the tools perspective, you would need a Google Forms. Again, that's another free tool. You can do it yourself, but I give you an illustration of what I use when I hire, right? So all you have to do is just maybe move a couple of boxes and maybe change a little bit the job description itself within the boxes, or whatever the parameters that you're specifically looking at. And with trial and error, I've tried many different ways of doing that. I feel like I've landed on that perfect form. And what Google Form is basically when they fill everything out, let's say their name, their gender, whatever, like I have a couple of very interesting, like nuanced items that they can add. For example, their voice recording. Because you're hiring from Philippines, you want to make sure that you yourself can understand that person, right? So you don't want to have this like massive language barrier. English is a second language in Philippines, but it doesn't mean that everyone speaks that language. So the closer you are to Manila, the capital, the better chances that that person speaks English. That you go out to more like villages, then there is less chances. So I've had different applicants applying, and sometimes based on that voice recording, I can gauge and say, okay, that person I'll probably have a hard time, a challenging time communicating with. So I don't even bring them in as a candidate, right? And it's right away, it's so easy for you to just have that and just go through those like recordings and like, okay, I'm gonna highlight only these two folks to hire, or not even to hire, to interview. You'll need Facebook groups. And again, I already vetted some of the amazing Facebook groups where I get the most traction. I myself, when I finally kind of like set up the process, in one day had 80 candidates, 80. So it's like insane. And I've had already, Mandy and I are in the GoBundance group, and I have at least like, 5 to 10 people reaching out to me, just thanking me for, they're like, I can't believe this. Like just by using the recommendations and the tweaks, I've already got like, I used to have 8 applicants for like a month, and they use the paid platforms, the one that I mentioned before. And they're like, I just used a process and I got like 50 to 100 applicants. So honestly, it's not a rocket science. So you'll need Zoom. That's how you'll be communicating with them. You'll have the interviews with them through Zooms. I'm also giving you a payment platform that I personally use. I mean, PayPal, but typically virtual assistants don't like PayPal because the exchange rate is not as great. So I'll give you an example of the platform that I use where you don't have to pay any fees. Virtual assistants are happy because the exchange rate is so much higher than PayPal is. And they pay a very small fee. I want to say about $1 or $2 for that payment to come through, but they're still happy because of that exchange rate is so much better than PayPal. And from the materials, what I'm giving you is job description. Again, your job description has to be very short, but very specific. You don't want to have, you don't want to have 100 applicants that are not fitting to your parameters, right? So you want to make sure that your job description is screaming for what you need specifically, right? For example, if I need a cold caller, I don't necessarily need a person that never had an experience of being on the phones, right? So like I would list it out on my job description. And the interview guide, I'm giving you like just list of questions to ask them. Like certain nuance, even like if you hire somebody from Philippines, the nuance is about having the backup internet connection. Like before, I would never even think about asking. In America, it's not a problem. But in Philippines, they always have those like typhoons and, hurricane seasons. And that's very important to know that your virtual assistant is always going to be available for you. So I give you some tips and tricks on what to ask them for and how to test their internet connection. And then once you go through that interview guide, I'll give you the, it's all in the course. So that there's an onboarding your virtual assistant material and managing your VA, right? It's just a high level guide on that. But my high level recommendation is treat your virtual assistant as your team member, right? Don't think that because they're in Philippines, and because I pay them $5 an hour, they're not my team member. Really like thank you and some occasional kind of like presents. Like when my virtual assistant has a birthday, I'll send them an additional, I don't know, $15, $20. For them, that's a huge deal. I cannot tell you enough. Like my latest one that I had a birthday and I just added some extra to her invoice. And she's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Thank you so much. And so she was so happy. I also have weekly meetings with them, right? Check-ins, how do you feel? And like, what's happening in your life? It's amazing how different my perspective of life here in the States is versus how they live, right? Like a couple of catch-ups that I did with my virtual assistant. One of them said, hey, I had a great news. I just bought a 1998 Toyota Corolla. And he was ecstatic, right? It's just getting to know them on that personal level. And he's like, and I got it through like my uncle's connection, and I'm gonna have this amazing car now and everything else. You really understand how much you give them as this job, right? Or my other VA just said, I was hanging out with my friends during the weekend and they all asked me about my job. And I said, really, what do they do? And one of them was a doctor, one of them was a police officer, and one of them was a teacher. And she said, all of them make probably 1/3 of what I make. And she works for me with $5 an hour full time. So if you think about, you know, even the perspective of the value that you give to that virtual assistant with your job, it really kind of like helps you understand that you're changing somebody's life. Like one of my virtual assistants, she's only 22. Her whole family relies on her. Like her parents and her siblings rely on her having this job. So anyway, I'm kind of like getting to more like the emotional part of that, but I did have like one of my MasterClass class that I have done before. I did have that question from somebody coming, like, aren't we abusing them? Like we're asking them to work night hours. Now, how do you personally feel about it? And that's my answer, right? That's what I told them. Like, I personally feel that I'm helping them dramatically, and I know it from my personal experience and based on what they tell me. So as a wrap up, I wanted to give you a special discount for the course. The price for the course is $399, but if you use the coupon code HIREVA now, there's going to be a 50% discount. And I'm going to stop presenting. I'm going to share the code, Mandy, if you don't mind, in the chat with the link for the course.
VA now. All right. I'll go to gallery view. Okay, first off, I have taken Anna's course, and I'll tell you, like the level of actionable, one of the hallmarks of Aspiring Women Achieving More is that we like stuff to be actionable, right? Like a good story is cool, but then how do I go use the stuff, right? And the reason this has been so impactful to so many high performing entrepreneurs is, you know, because it's do this, then do that, then think about this, then that. So I'm a huge advocate of that. So anyway, I feel like we have a little bit of time left here. I know I have a couple of questions. So sure. Are you willing to take a couple for us here, Anna?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, in terms of the interview process, you know, what is like the biggest stumbling block, the biggest thing you learned from interviewing your first VA to now? What are one or two things?
Sure. I don't know if it's a dynamic of just generally virtual assistant world or it's a cultural thing. I actually had to ask one of my virtual assistants, but one thing to keep in mind is if you are scheduling an interview and confirming the time, do not expect that everyone's going to show up. Like that was one of my key learnings. And it's okay. They sort of like made that decision for you, right? So you kind of like, you were happy that you didn't hire that person. So if they showed up, that's already like a huge indicator. So keep that in mind. Like if they showed up in the interview, whenever you have X many applicants, let's say if you pick maybe like 5 or 6 to interview, and let's say 4 or 5 showed up, which I would say probably 20% won't show up. It's not everyone. Please do keep in mind to have like that extra backup if you don't get through them. And sometimes they'll kind of very communicative with you on the, during the process of via email, and then you get to the point where they just kind of like not at the interview, and just kind of like an expectation going in, and also being ready with all of your questions for all the interviews, right? That's why I'm giving you that guide. What I realized myself is after I've done 5 interviews, now it's hard for me to go back and remember, oh, listen, I think it was Sean that said that he has like this amazing internet connection, or maybe it was Mary who had this amazing experience calling like real estate, based on like a real estate in the real estate field. So what I'm doing is in each of those guides that I have for you, on top, I write the summary. Like in of each question, I have the answer, but on top, I have a summary. So then when I'm done with all the interview process, I actually have a connection to the person. And then I'm kind of relating, okay, now I can have a easier choice after those 5 interviews. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that was super helpful. It's not even something that I thought of, but you're totally right. My poor little pea brain that's over. The reason I need a VA is because I'm over like scheduled. So of course I'm going to forget everything as I'm talking about it. So Annette, we saw your question. Camilla was gracious enough to post from her notes exactly what Annalise said on finding the best places to look. We will have this recording available in the Aspiring Women Achieving More forum as well. So I have one more question for you.
Sure.
So, when I take a big step back, if I'm looking, $5 an hour times 40 hours a week times 50 weeks in a year, like that's 10 grand for an entire year's work for a human who's going to help me build my dreams, right? Like, so that's not a tremendous commitment when I look at it like that. That being said, a thing in the back of my head is nervous that I'm not going to have enough to fill up that person's schedule. What advice would you give? Would go part-time with someone or go full-time with someone right off the bat?
Right. I think you should probably have a list of those items and sort of gauge from the very beginning. Is it like, does it take you? How many hours does it take you? Right. So if it takes you about 5 hours, maybe increase it because that's going to be a new person, right? And that you want to grow them, right? You want to give them more tasks. So in that case, that's probably 20 hours a week. But if you already have 20 hours and you want to grow them, you're going to be outsourcing more tasks. I'm telling you, this is very addicting, right? Like once you outsource a few things, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can outsource that. And you pile on them. Soon enough, you're going to be like, I need 2 VAs.
Yeah.
So think of
I feel like
is what's your threshold in the very beginning, and okay to actually advertise and only hire for part-time, but you can be in advance ahead of time, kind of putting out there and say, hey, I can only hire for part-time right now, but I am. So I'd love for you to kind of bring you on board. And I actually have one VA that works part-time. He started part-time, he is still part-time, and it actually works for him. Because he has a job working for a New Zealand company, and that timeline aligns with the Filipino time. So he just needs an extra shift, and he's doing really well for me. But one thing I kind of want to be cautious for you too. If you hire somebody part-time, ask them whether they have another job. Because you want to make sure that your VA doesn't work 2 full-time jobs. I've seen that happen before. They're so overworked, it only makes you question the quality of their work. So you want to make sure that they're not overworked. Even if they work another part-time job, ask them about the hours. Do they have to sleep in between?
I feel like you're, talking to W2/real estate investing /moms here all on the line. Yes, I do work 2 full-time jobs, Anna. I know you do too. All right. So Nikki, I see your hand up. Do you want to ask a quick question here?
Yeah, so I'm sorry I'm backlit, so I look like the silhouette of an angry librarian. I apologize. I am fingers in a lot of really disparate pies right now because I'm in the process of learning a couple different things and sort of shaking out where I want my big focus to be coming up in the next few years. And those different pies do not touch. So mine might not only be part-time, but I might need like 3 or 4 people super part-time. So I might have someone, I'm not going to hire the same person to do cold calls as I would hire to do to contact old business for a cybersecurity company that's in a major corporation that needs to do like repeat business, or somebody that I wanted to have scouring Reddit to figure out what's going on for millennial investors because I'm looking for the news for options trading. So it's like, those are very, very different skill sets. How, like, is it reasonable to put the effort into hiring good quality people and saying, hey, look, right now it might be 5 hours a week, but maybe if you do an awesome job, we bump up to 10 hours, but like, they're just, it's going to be so different. I don't know how to even start to combine those skill sets. What's your advice on that?
Right. I actually would probably in that case consider hiring for tasks.
Okay.
And in that case, you can actually have 10. I mean, you know, the sky's the limit in that case. I would actually not advise for you to have a cold caller doing the data scouring or sort of like online research, because those are the two different skill sets. You sometimes find that unicorn, but I did find even through my virtual assistant is if one is really good with admin tasks, some like data management, they're not as great in cold calling. And the other way around, my cold caller, if I ask him to do something like very basic in Excel, he sucks. Like I can tell you, I have to teach him for an hour to do like basic, maybe, you know, table or something like that. So in that case, I would advise for you to hire for tasks and be upfront about it. I need somebody 5 hours a week to do like online scavenging or something like that. And the more specific you are in your post right away, there is no kind of like point of like being disappointed. Oh, I thought you're going to be hiring me full time for this. No, like people apply because they just read you only need for 5 hours. And maybe there is a busy mom that only needs 5 hours. You never know. She just needs to fill in that gap.
Okay. So if you were doing a project based, like, hey, this is the only thing I'm going to ask of you, I'm not going to pop up later and be like, hey, also, could you do some bookkeeping for me? Would you do a project like based pay, a weekly pay, still with the hourly pay? How would you manage that pay thing?
Good question.
I think it depends. So if you
would it depend on how repetitive it is? Like, I only need you to do this for 2 weeks, or I might need you to do this going on forever.
Right. And maybe let me give you an example of some things that I've done with some of my VAs. Let's say like I had a list of hedge funds and I wanted for them to call, or no, not even call, send each of them an email and say, hey, if you're interested in single family homes, you know, I provide a supply, right? So I had a list of maybe 300. In the 300, I figured it took me about 2 minutes to send an email because it's a copy and paste kind of message. And I was like, well, on average, it's going to take X, right? So I could have done it by hours, or I could have done it, do 300 and I'll pay you X, right? So if she would have to send 300, that would be I'll pay you $10 for that or something like that. So think of what's your sort of KPI. Is your metric based on, I want volume and they're going to be keep like researching this stuff? And I expect them, so it's my cold caller. I expect him to work full time, 5 days a week. And I expect in that time frame to get at least 1 to 2 quality leads per day. So within my week time frame, I have to have between 5 to 10. If I don't get that, then I'm talking to them about the quality. I said, well, what's up? Is it my list? Have you not showed up or whatever it is, right? So there's another way for me to measure that KPI. Then I fine paying them still by hour. But if your assignment is driven by the KPI, you need to be assigned to, I don't know, 50 Facebook groups because you need to advertise there or something like that, right? You can pay per task and say, hey, once you're done, I'm going to pay you X.
Okay. I need to think about that a little bit more and like really process it in my brain. So I know that I need a virtual assistant at some level in my life, and I haven't quite quantified what that is. So A, does that discount code have an expiration date? Because I need to like sit down and really list out, and quite frankly, like my next month and a half is pretty much like jam booked. So I don't have time right now, but
I think once you buy the course, you can watch the course for eternity, right?
Okay. Yes. I do right now have it until the end of October.
But I can highly recommend, because I mean, think of it, like you're basically, even if you buy back 10 of your hours, Would you pay $150 to buy back 10 of your hours? I know I do that with my cleaning lady for like 1 hour. So
Right.
anyway, Camilla, do you have any questions? Camilla and Anna, you definitely need to know each other too. You're two of my very favorite humans. Nikki, you as well, but I've known them longer. So yeah.
Hey Anna, nice to meet you. Super excited to meet you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I had a couple questions. So I have one VA right now, and she's a US based VA, so she's more expensive, of course, than a Filipino based VA. And she helps me run social media. And I think I really liked her because she had experience and helps me with strategy, because I'm not very good at like the strategy piece of it. So my question is, in hiring like the Filipino VAs, have you found them to be able to help? Like, could they guide me, or do I have to be the one dictating everything to them? I'm kind of looking for a back and forth, I guess.
Sure, that's a good question. So for my specific example, when I hired my SEO guy, I was very specific. For example, my website is on Carrot platform. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's just on a very specific platform, and it's a very specific niche in real estate. And it's very specific just for wholesaling. It's not for real estate agents. It's not for anything else, right? So when I was hiring, I specifically called it out. I need somebody to manage my SEO platform on Carrot website for real estate wholesalers. When I had the applicants, I found a guy who's doing just that. Not running the dentist clinic, not running it on a other platform, specifically that experience. And since then, I've been trying to test him out. I was like, how well is he doing? Because SEO takes a long time. And I knew that going in. But I probably had about 10 people American-based, because I thought, well, I've grown so much, maybe I should hire an American-based company. I mean, maybe they're doing a much better job, because there's a reason why I pay my VA here maybe $600 an hour, my virtual assistant, versus, I'm sorry, not an hour, a month.
Whoa.
Huge mistake. A month, because it's a task-based, right? And
Yeah.
And all of the US-based companies were like, the minimum management fee was $2,500 for SEO. So I had some people like, yeah, we're about $20,000 a year. And that's a ton of money. I hope it's worth it. But once I give them like, hey, can you check my website and see if you can bring more value to it? They run it and they're like, you know what? You're doing pretty well. And it's not that they're saying like, I cannot add any more. They're saying I can probably help you like 5% more. And I'm not so sure that they're actually going to be that dramatically different. It's just the time that plays in there. So when time came for me to decide, who do I hire? Where do I hire somebody for managing my PPC, like Google campaigns? And I just about to start, I went with my SEO guy to ask him who he knows to manage my PPC campaign. And only because I know that he's probably vetted them, because he works with other customers in other states. And I knew that he's going to be recommending me a great guy. Again, I've done my work. The folks in the States would want to charge me probably like 10 to 15% of my campaign management money. So if I need to spend about $5,000 between PPC and Facebook, they want to get at least $500 to maybe more, like $1,000 a month just to manage on top of my campaign dollars, right? So I went ahead with them. So I would say if you already have some traction with your US employee, like virtual assistant, it's not going to hurt if you're going to find out what everyone else is charging. I would recommend Philippines or India. India is pretty good for, any online type of work. And just to see what are the rates out there, what are the results. My guy specifically showed me his clients in other markets and how much they've tracked over time. So that's your sort of like reference. Mm-hmm. Ask for those references and see how well they do.
Well, and social media strategy is not like this one specific website. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I've got to imagine that there's somebody with marketing prowess that lives in a country different from ours. You know what I mean? But the more specific you're asking, and you could hire them, one of the things that I'm in the process of doing is I mean, I do those little quote cards for aspiring women, right? I'm basically going to give them a quote and show them an example and say, make it. And they're going to send it back to me as their test for employment, right? So, I mean, how can you test to see if or can you look at other campaigns that have been, you know, social media strategy to see if it's something that you like the direction it's on?
And Mandy, I agree with what you're saying. For anything that requires native language to be, especially quotes, it's very intricate. And I know it because I'm not like my mother tongue is not English. So I know for sure that sometimes I make mistakes that are very silly, but they're not intuitive to me, right? I used to say, let me make a picture of you, right? Because in Russian language, you make everything. You make and make and make. And the same in German, you know, it's always like, but in English, it's taking everything. It's like take, right? So it took me like 10 years to switch from making picture to taking picture, right? So if it's very heavy on the language, yes, I would test it out. If there are other alternatives, you can probably go like vertical. You could go to Central America and hire somebody there, more like maybe expat from the States, where like English is such a like their first language, or it's like so integrated that you're not going to have the problems like that.
One of my BFFs is Russian, and she thought that when you put a stake in the ground, that you buried a piece of meat. Put a stake in the ground.
That's right. That's right.
So good. I love Anna. I am so grateful, you guys, and anybody watching the recording. This is a huge opportunity to save yourself some time and do it with, you know, this is the blueprint, right? Like the reason that we do this coaching stuff, the reason that we do, you know, pay for things to move our businesses forward. This is not meant to be a sales pitch. This is why I did it. You know, it lessened that learning curve really tremendously for me, and it is helping me buy back some of my time. So Anna, super grateful. Everybody who joined us, thank you. I have everybody who's hidden camera.
Thank you so much, Mandy. And I do want to leave you with one last kind of like tip. If you do decide to hire a VA, or Camilla, you have a VA and let's say you're expanding, have that VA hire all of your other VAs, because that's what I did. Like I decided how to outsource the outsourcer, right? So from now, what I do is they follow the same process. They record all the interviews on Zoom. All I have to do is watch the top 2 candidates and pick. That's it. I don't do anything. So
that's glorious.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
What would Anna Lee do? WWALD. Awesome.
Okay,
all right, girls.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
You.
We
Have a good
appreciate
one.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. See ya.